Captain Lee Ji-won stood on the bridge of his small trading ship, staring at the screen in front of him. The red warning light blinked over and over again. His ship had just picked up a distress signal from deep space. The signal was weak, but the computer had already figured out what it was saying. New Seoul calling any ship. Engine failure. Need help. 50,000 people on board. Ji-won felt his heart skip a beat. The New Seoul was a human colony ship. It had left Earth 6 months ago, heading for a new world called Haven's Rest. The Saomyo ship carried families, workers, and scientists who wanted to start fresh on a planet far from the crowded cities of Earth. Dr. Park, Ji-won called to the man sitting at the science station. Come look at this. Dr. Park Min-ho was a thin man with gray hair and thick glasses. He knew more about alien races than almost anyone in human space. He walked over to Ji-won's chair and looked at the screen. Where did this signal come from? Park asked. The Kethvar system, Ji-won replied. That's not good. The Kethvarians don't like visitors. Park nodded slowly. The Kethvarian Empire was known across the galaxy for being mean and aggressive. They had a strong military and liked to take over weaker worlds. Most traders stayed away from their space. How long ago did we lose contact with the New Seoul? Park asked. Ji-won checked his records. 3 months. They sent a message saying they had engine trouble and were going to stop for repairs. Nothing since then. Park looked worried. 3 months is a long time. If the Kethvarians found them first. He didn't finish the sentence. Both men knew what the Kethvarians did to ships they found in their space. Sometimes they took prisoners to sell as slaves. Sometimes they just destroyed everything. Far away in the Kethvar system, Commander Veltar was having the best day of his career. His patrol ships had found something amazing floating in space near the 4th planet. It was a huge ship, bigger than anything the Kethvarians had ever built. The ship wasn't moving, and it wasn't sending any signals. Veltar looked at the readings his science officer had given him. Are you sure about this? He asked. Yes, Commander, the young officer replied. The ship has no weapons that we can see. The engines are cold. It looks like it's been here for months. Veltar smiled. This could be the discovery that made him famous, maybe even famous enough to become a general. He ordered his ships to move closer. As they got near the strange ship, Veltar's excitement grew. The ship was beautiful in a way that Kethvarian ships were not. It had smooth curves instead of sharp angles. The metal looked different too, like it was made from something better than what his people used. Sir, his communication officer called out, I'm getting some signals from inside the ship. It looks like there are living things on board. How many? Veltar asked. The officer worked at his controls for a few minutes. The computer says about 50,000, sir. They all seem to be sleeping. Veltar's eyes went wide. 50,000 slaves would be worth more money than he could count. He would be rich beyond his dreams. But then he heard a voice behind him. Commander, you must not do this. Veltar turned around to see High Chancellor Morden walking onto the bridge. Morden was very old even for a Kethvarian. His scales were almost white with age, and he walked with a stick to help him balance. Chancellor, Veltar said with respect. What are you talking about? Morden pointed at the strange ship on the viewing screen. That ship, those people, you must leave them alone. Veltar was confused. Why? They're just aliens. Probably weak ones if they couldn't fix their own ship. Mordoon's old eyes looked scared. No, Commander. Those are not just any aliens. Look at the markings on their ship. Veltar looked more carefully. There were symbols painted on the side of the ship. They looked like letters, but not in any language he knew. What do they say? Veltar asked. They say, New Seoul and United Earth Colonial Service. Morden replied. Commander, those are humans. Veltar had heard of humans before, but only in old stories. They were supposed to be a small, weak race from a planet called Earth. So what if they are? He asked. Morden grabbed Veltar's arm with his old, shaky hand. There is an old law, Commander. The oldest law in the galaxy. It says, do not hunt the humans. Veltar pulled his arm away. That's just an old story, Chancellor. Something to scare children. No, Morden said loudly. It is real. My grandfather told me the story when I was young. His grandfather told him. The law goes back thousands of years. But Veltar was not listening anymore. He was looking at the human ship and thinking about how rich he would be. 50,000 slaves. Maybe more if there were valuable things on the ship too. Commander, his tactical officer called out. Should we board the ship? Veltar looked at Morden one more time. The old chancellor was shaking his head and mumbling words in the old language. Something about sleeping giants and whirlwinds. Yes, Veltar said finally. Get our boarding teams ready. We're going to take that ship. Meanwhile, Captain Jiwan had made up his mind. He couldn't leave 50,000 humans floating helpless in Kethvarian space. Even if it was dangerous, even if his small ship couldn't do much against Kethvarian warships, he had to try. Set course for the Kethvar system, he told his pilot. Best speed. Sir, Park said quietly. Maybe we should call for help first. Contact Earth Defense Command. Jiwan shook his head. That will take too long. Earth is 3 weeks away, even for a fast military ship. The new Sol doesn't have 3 weeks. Park understood, but he still looked worried. He went back to his station and started looking through old files. Something about what Jiwan had said made him think. Why would the Kethvarians leave a human ship alone for 3 months? Why hadn't they attacked or boarded it already? He started searching through historical records, looking for any mention of humans and Kethvarians meeting before. What he found made him very confused. There were records of human ships visiting Kethvarian space hundreds of years ago. But the files were strange. Many of them were corrupted or had missing parts. The ones he could read talked about treaties and agreements, but they didn't make much sense. One file caught his attention. It was very old and most of it was unreadable, but he could make out a few words. Ancient law and do not wake the sleeping giant. Park felt a chill run down his back. What did that mean? And why did he have the feeling that something terrible was about to happen? Back in Kethvarian space, Veltar's boarding ships were getting ready to dock with the human vessel. His soldiers were excited. They had heard about the 50,000 prisoners they were going to capture. High Chancellor Morden stood alone on the bridge, watching the preparations. He whispered an old prayer in the ancient language, asking the gods to forgive them for what they were about to do. They who wake the sleeping giants, he said quietly, shall reap the whirlwind. The boarding pods from Veltar's ships hit the hull of the new Sol with loud metal crashes. Kethvarian soldiers poured out of the pods, their heavy boots making noise as they walked through the human ship's corridors. The ship seemed empty and quiet. Emergency lights blinked red in the darkness. The air was cold and smelled like metal and machines. Sub-Commander Crix led the first boarding team. He was younger than Veltar and wanted to prove himself. His soldiers carried energy, weapons and scanning devices. They moved carefully through the ship, checking each room. This place is like a tomb, one of the soldiers said. Crix nodded. The human ship felt dead and lifeless, but his scanners showed thousands of life signs somewhere deeper in the ship. The humans are in the lower levels, Crix told his team. Some kind of sleeping chambers, let's go find them. What the Kethvarians didn't know was that their boarding had caused problems with the ship's systems. When their pods hit the hull, they damaged some important cables. The ship's computer was trying to fix itself, but it was having trouble. Deep in the ship, in a room full of sleeping pods, warning lights started to flash. The computer's voice spoke in the empty room. Hull breach detected. Emergency protocols activated. Waking security personnel. Kim Sunho opened his eyes for the first time in 3 months. The lid of his sleeping pod hissed open, and cold air hit his face. He sat up slowly, feeling dizzy and confused. His body was stiff from sleeping so long. Sunho was the head of security for the new Sol. He was a big man with strong arms and a serious face. Before joining the colony mission, he had been a soldier in Earth's defense force. Computer, he said, his voice rough from sleep. What's happening? The ship has been boarded by unknown aliens, the computer replied. Hull breaches in sections 7, 12, and 15. 47 unknown life forms detected inside the ship. Sunho felt ice in his stomach. Someone had attacked their ship while they were sleeping. He pressed a button on his pod and 3 more pods opened nearby. Choi Yuna woke up next. She was an engineer and also Sunho's partner. Her black hair was messy from sleeping, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "What's wrong?" she asked. "We're being boarded," Sunho replied. "Wake up Lee Do-yeon and Park Jin-soo. We need to get to the weapons locker." As more security people woke up, Sunho used the ship's communication system to see what was happening. The cameras showed him alien soldiers moving through the corridors. They had gray skin and wore dark armor. They carried weapons that looked dangerous. "Kethvarians," Yuna said when she saw them. "I recognize them from the databases." Sunho nodded. That was bad news. Kethvarians were known for being cruel to prisoners. "How many people are awake?" Sunho asked the computer. 12 security personnel and 6 engineers, the computer replied. All other colonists remain in suspended animation. 18 people against 47 armed soldiers. Not good odds, but Sunho had been in worse situations before. "Computer, can you wake up more people?" "Negative. The damaged systems have made it unsafe to wake large numbers of colonists. The life support system can only handle the current number of active personnel." Sunho cursed under his breath. They were on their own. "Yuna, take 3 people to the weapons locker. Get everything we have. Do-yeon, you and Jin-soo secure the computer core. I don't want these aliens getting access to our systems." The humans moved through their ship like ghosts. They knew every corridor, every room, every hiding place. The ship had been their home for months before they went to sleep. Crix and his soldiers were still looking for the sleeping humans when the first trap was sprung. Do-hyun had rewired some of the ship's systems. When the Kethvarian soldiers opened a door to what they thought was a storage room, they got a face full of hot steam from a broken pipe. The aliens screamed and fell back, their skin burned by the superheated water. In the confusion, Lee Jin-soo dropped from a ceiling panel and grabbed one of their weapons. "Targets acquired," Jin-soo said into his radio. "These things don't look so tough up close." But Jin-soo was wrong about that. The Kethvarians were experienced fighters. Crix rallied his soldiers quickly, and they started to hunt for the humans who had attacked them. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Kethvarians had ever seen. The humans didn't fight like normal people. They didn't charge forward with weapons blazing. Instead, they used the ship itself as a weapon. Yuna had taken control of the ship's environmental systems. She could turn lights on and off, change the temperature in different rooms, and even control the artificial gravity. When Kethvarian soldiers entered the dining hall, she turned off the gravity, and they found themselves floating helplessly in the air. Sunho and his team used the ship's maintenance tunnels to move around without being seen. They would appear, suddenly, attack the aliens, and then disappear again before the Kethvarians could fight back. "What kind of creatures are these?" one of Crix's soldiers asked, after they lost another team member to a human ambush. "Just animals," Crix replied, but he didn't sound sure anymore. "Keep moving. We need to find their command center." On his command ship, Veltar was getting worried reports from the boarding teams. They had been on the human ship for 2 hours and still hadn't found the sleeping colonists. "Sir," his communication officer said, "Sub-Commander Crix is requesting more soldiers." "More soldiers?" Veltar asked. "How many humans are awake?" "Crix reports maybe 20 at most, sir." Veltar was angry. His soldiers should have captured 20 humans easily. "Tell Crix that if he can't handle a few weak aliens, I'll find someone who can." But High Chancellor Morden, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and walked to Veltar's chair. "Commander," the old Kethvarian said, "you should listen to your soldiers. Something is wrong." "Nothing is wrong," Veltar snapped. "My men are just being careful." Morden shook his head. "The humans are fighting back just like the old stories said they would." "What old stories?" "The stories about why the law exists," Morden replied. "The stories about what happens when you make humans angry." Back on the New Sol, the battle was getting worse for the Kethvarians. They had started with 47 soldiers. Now they had 32. The humans had not lost anyone yet. Sunho was in the ship's control room with Yuna, planning their next move. They had managed to keep the aliens away from the sleeping colonists, but they couldn't do it forever. "We need to send a message," Sunho said. "Let people know what's happening here." Yuna was working at the communication console. "I can get a signal out, but it will take time to reach anyone who can help." "Do it anyway," Sunho replied. "And make sure the message is clear about who attacked us." Yuna started recording the message. "This is the colony ship New Sol. We are under attack by Kethvarian forces in the Kethvar system. They have boarded our ship and are trying to capture our colonists. We are fighting back, but we need help." She paused for a moment, then added something that would change everything. "To any human ship that receives this message, you have made a grave error. We are calling our family home." The message went out into space, traveling at the speed of light toward human colonies, trading posts, and eventually toward Earth itself. Meanwhile, Captain Jiwon's small trading ship was still racing toward the Kethvar system. Dr. Park had been working for hours, trying to find more information about humans and Kethvarians in the old databases. "Jiwon," Park called out suddenly, "you need to see this." Park had found something in the deepest archives. It was an old file, thousands of years old. Most of it was corrupted, but he had managed to recover some of it. "It's a treaty," Park said, "between humans and something called the Galactic Council. But look at this part." He pointed to a section of text that was still readable. "In exchange for voluntary withdrawal from galactic affairs, all member species agree to abide by the following restrictions. Do not hunt the humans. Do not attack human ships. Do not enslave human populations." Jiwon stared at the screen. "Voluntary withdrawal? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Park replied. "But there's more. Look at this." Another section of the treaty was visible. "Violation of these terms will result in immediate resumption of human expansion activities and the deployment of reserve fleet assets." "Reserve fleet?" Jiwon asked. "What reserve fleet?" Park shook his head. "I have no idea. But whatever it is, the Kethvarians are about to find out." The message from the New Sol traveled through space faster than any ship could fly. It bounced from communication relay to communication relay, growing stronger as it moved toward human space. On the planet New Tokyo, at the headquarters of Earth's Defense Command, Admiral Song Hyok was having his morning coffee when the emergency alert started screaming. Song was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his younger days as a ship's engineer. He had been in charge of human military forces for 10 years. In all that time, he had never seen an alert like this one. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Kang Miso, ran into his office. "We're getting an emergency signal from the colony ship New Sol." Song put down his coffee cup. "What kind of emergency?" "They're under attack, sir. Kethvarian forces have boarded their ship." Song felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had hoped this day would never come, but he had always known it might. "Get me General Han Mirai," he said quietly, "and wake up the War Council. All of them." "Sir?" Kang looked confused. "Should I also contact the Colonial Defense Force?" Song shook his head. "No, Lieutenant. This is bigger than that. Much bigger." 20 minutes later, Song was in a secure room deep under the Defense Command building. Around him sat the most important military leaders in human space. They were all looking at a large screen showing the message from the New Sol. General Han Mirai was the first to speak. She was younger than Song, but just as experienced. Her family had been soldiers for generations. "How many people are on that ship?" she asked. 50,000 colonists, Song replied, plus crew, mostly families and civilian workers. "And the Kethvarians are trying to capture them as slaves," Han said. It wasn't a question. Song nodded. "That's what it looks like." Another officer, Admiral Park Tae-woo, leaned forward. "Sir, what are your orders? Should we send a rescue fleet?" Song was quiet for a long moment. Everyone in the room was waiting for him to speak. Finally, he stood up and walked to another computer terminal. "Computer," he said. "Authorization Song Alpha 77. Access Project Sleeping Giant." The screen changed to show files that most of the people in the room had never seen before. Files with names like reserve fleet locations and deep space assets and emergency response protocols. My God, Han whispered. It's all real. Song turned back to face the room. Ladies and gentlemen, for 3,000 years, humanity has lived quietly in our little corner of the galaxy. We've traded with other species, sent out colony ships, explored new worlds. We've been good neighbors. He pressed another button and the screen showed a map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the map that most humans knew. This map showed hundreds of red dots in places where humans weren't supposed to have any ships. But we never forgot who we used to be, Song continued. And we never stopped preparing for the day when someone would break the oldest law in the galaxy. On the screen, the red dots started moving. Ships that had been hiding in empty space for decades suddenly came to life. Space stations that everyone thought were research posts revealed their true purpose. Fleets that were supposed to be exploring. The galaxy's edge turned around and started heading toward Kethvarian space. Sir, one of the younger officers asked. What exactly are we doing? Han answered for Song. We're reminding the galaxy why the law exists. While the human military was waking up, Captain Jiwan was still racing toward the Kethvar system. Dr. Park had found more information in the old files, and what he learned made him very afraid. Jiwan, Park said. I think I understand what happened 3,000 years ago. Tell me, Jiwan replied, not taking his eyes off the navigation display. Humans didn't join the galactic community, Park explained. We conquered it. In less than 50 years, human fleets took over most of the known galaxy. Jiwan's hands tightened on the ship's controls. That's impossible. Humans are peaceful. We're explorers and traders, not conquerors. Park shook his head. That's what they want everyone to think now. But look at these records. Earth didn't just build colony ships back then. They built war fleets, hundreds of them. Ships with weapons that could destroy planets. He showed Jiwan more files on his computer. Pictures of massive human warships, battle reports from dozens of star systems, surrender documents signed by alien governments. The other species couldn't stop us, Park continued. So they made a deal. Humans would go back to Earth and stay in their own small area of space. In exchange, no one would ever attack or enslave humans again. But why? Jiwan asked. Why would humans agree to that? Because humans are peaceful, Park replied. At least they wanted to be. The war was making them into something they didn't want to become. So they chose to step back and let other species live in peace. And if someone breaks the agreement? Park pointed to another file on his screen. Then the sleeping giant wakes up. On the New Sol, the battle was getting worse. The Kethvarian soldiers had finally found the sections where the colonists were sleeping. Kim Sunho and his team were fighting desperately to keep them away. Yuna! Sunho called over the sound of energy weapons firing. How much longer can we hold them? Yuna was crouched behind a computer console trying to keep the ship's defenses working. Not much longer, she replied. They've brought in more soldiers. It was true. Veltar had sent every soldier he had onto the human ship. There were now over 100 Kethvarian fighters moving through the corridors. But the humans weren't giving up. They had turned the ship into a maze of traps and ambushes. Every room was a potential battlefield. Every corridor could become a trap. Sunho looked at his remaining people. He had started with 18. Now he had 11. They were tired, hurt, and running out of ammunition. Sir, one of his security officers, Nam Ji-hoon, crawled over to him. Maybe we should wake up more colonists. Get them to help fight. Sunho shook his head. Most of them are families, children, scientists. They're not soldiers. Then what do we do? Before Sunho could answer, the ship's communication system came to life. But this time, it wasn't Yuna sending a message. Someone was calling them. New Sol, this is Admiral Song Hyuk of Earth Defense Command. We have received your message. Sunho felt hope for the first time in hours. Admiral, thank God. Can you send help? Help is already on the way, Song replied. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to hold out for 6 more hours. 6 hours. Sunho looked around at his exhausted team. Sir, I don't know if we can last that long. You have to, Song said, and his voice was serious. Son, you and your people are not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for every human in the galaxy. If the Kethvarians succeed in taking your ship, it will tell other species that the old law doesn't matter anymore. Sunho understood. What do you need us to do? Keep broadcasting. Let the galaxy know that humans are fighting back. Let them know that we remember who we are. On Veltar's command ship, the Kethvarian commander was getting angry. His soldiers had been fighting on the human ship for 8 hours and still hadn't captured all the sleeping colonists. How many humans are left fighting? He asked Sub-Commander Crix over the radio. Maybe 10, sir, Crix replied. But they know this ship better than we do. Every time we think we have them cornered, they disappear. Veltar was about to order more reinforcements when his communication officer called out. Sir, we're getting signals from all over the galaxy. Ships are moving toward our position. What ships? Veltar demanded. The officer worked at his controls. For a moment. I'm not sure, sir. The signals are coming from ships I've never seen before. Big ones. High Chancellor Morden, who had been sitting quietly during the battle, suddenly stood up. His old face was pale with fear. Commander, he said, you must order your soldiers to leave that ship. Now. I will not retreat, Veltar shouted. We're winning. No, Morden replied. You're waking something that has been sleeping for 3,000 years, and when it fully awakens, it will remember why the galaxy used to fear the humans. Far away at the edge of Kethvarian space, the first human ships were beginning to arrive. But these weren't the small trading vessels or colony ships that most aliens were used to seeing. These were warships, huge, sleek, and deadly. Ships that had been hidden in dark space for centuries, waiting for this moment. Captain Oh Sungmin stood on the bridge of the battleship Incheon. His ship was 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. All ships report. Ready, sir? His tactical officer said. Oh nodded. Signal the fleet, we're going in. The first sign that something was wrong came when Veltar's long-range sensors started showing impossible readings. Ships were appearing at the edge of the Kethvar system, but they weren't coming from normal space lanes. Sir, the sensor officer said, his voice shaking. I'm reading 37 ships approaching from Sector 7, but that's impossible. There's nothing in Sector 7 except empty space. Veltar looked at the display screen. The ships were big, much bigger than anything the Kethvarians had, and they were moving fast, faster than physics should allow. What kind of ships are those? Veltar asked. I don't know, sir. The computer can't identify them. They're using technology I've never seen before. High Chancellor Morden walked slowly to the viewing screen. When he saw the approaching ships, he closed his eyes and said a prayer in the old language. Those are human ships, Commander, he said quietly. Real human ships. That's impossible, Veltar replied. Humans don't have a military fleet. They're just traders and farmers. Morden laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's what they wanted you to think. On the bridge of the Incheon, Captain O was watching the Kethvarian ships through his tactical display. There were 12 of them, arranged in a defensive formation around the disabled human colony ship. Analysis? O asked his tactical officer. Dr. Lim Jae-ho Lim was a thin man with quick eyes who had spent his career studying alien military tactics. Standard Kethvarian battle formation, sir. They're trying to protect their prize while their soldiers finish boarding the new Soul. How? Many soldiers do they have on that ship? Approximately 120 based on the boarding pods we can see. O nodded. And how many humans are still fighting? Unknown, sir. But based on the communications we've intercepted, not many. O turned to face his crew. These men and women had trained their whole lives for this moment, even though they had hoped it would never come. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, today we remind the galaxy why our ancestors made the old law. Today we show them what happens when you hurt our family. The human fleet moved into the system like a force of nature, but they didn't charge in with weapons blazing like most military forces would. Instead, they moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single machine. The Kethvarian ships tried to form a battle line, but the humans didn't give them time. Before Veltar could even give orders, 3 of his ships simply stopped working. "What happened?" Veltar shouted at his officers. "Don't know, sir," the tactical officer replied. "The ships just went dark. No explosions, no visible damage. They're just dead in space." What Veltar didn't understand was that the humans weren't using normal weapons. Their ships carried devices that could shut down enemy electronics from a distance. The Kethvarian ships hadn't been destroyed. They had been paralyzed. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "the human ships are sending us a message." "Put it on screen," Veltar ordered. "Captain." O's face appeared on the viewing screen. He looked calm and professional, like he was discussing the weather. "Kethvarian vessels," O said. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces from the human colony ship and leave this system. This is your only warning." Veltar felt anger rise in his chest. "You can't order us around. This is Kethvarian space." O's expression didn't change. 20 seconds. "We have more ships than you do," Veltar shouted. "We can fight." 10 seconds. O replied calmly. Veltar looked around. His bridge. His officers were all staring at him, waiting for orders. He had spent his whole career building a reputation as a strong leader. He couldn't back down now. "All ships," he said into his communication system. "Attack the human fleet." O shook, his head sadly. Time's up. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The human ships didn't just defeat the Kethvarian fleet. They took it apart piece by piece with surgical precision. Dr. Lim had studied Kethvarian tactics for years. He knew exactly how they would attack, how they would try to defend themselves, and what their weaknesses were. The human battle plan didn't just counter the Kethvarian strategy. It turned their own strengths against them. When the Kethvarian ships tried to surround the human fleet, they found themselves surrounded instead. When they tried to use their superior numbers, they discovered that their ships were getting in each other's way. Veltar watched in horror as his fleet was destroyed around him. The humans used weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Energy beams that bent around obstacles, missiles that appeared inside his ship's shields, technology that shouldn't exist. "How are they doing this?" he asked his science officer. "I don't know, sir," the officer replied. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." But it wasn't just technology that made the difference. The human crews fought with a coordination that seemed impossible. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship was and what it was doing. They moved like they shared the same mind. In less than an hour, the entire Kethvarian fleet was either destroyed or disabled. Veltar's command ship was the last one left, and it was surrounded by human warships. "Kethvarian commander," O's voice came over the communication system. "Prepare to be boarded." Veltar felt fear for the first time in his life. "You can't do this. We're an official military force. There are laws." "Yes," O replied. "There are laws. You broke the oldest one in the galaxy." On the new Sol, Kim Sunho and his remaining fighters heard the sounds of battle outside their ship. The Kethvarian soldiers who had been attacking them suddenly seemed confused and scared. "What's happening out there?" one of Sunho's men asked. Before Sunho could answer, the ship's communication system came to life again. "New Sol, this is Captain Oh Seungmin of the Earth Defense Force. We're coming aboard to assist you." Sunho felt relief wash over him. "Captain, we have Kethvarian soldiers throughout the ship, about 100 of them. Not for much longer," Oh replied. The human boarding parties that came on to the new Sol were nothing like the Kethvarian soldiers. They moved through the ship like ghosts, using advanced equipment and perfect teamwork. The aliens who had seemed so dangerous before were suddenly helpless. Within 2 hours, every Kethvarian soldier on the ship had been captured or surrendered. Not one human life was lost in the process. Sub-Commander Crix found himself face-to-face with a human soldier in the ship's main corridor. The human was smaller than Crix, but something about the way he moved made the Kethvarian afraid. "Surrender your weapons," the human said quietly. Crix looked around. All of his soldiers were already on the ground with their hands behind their heads. Human soldiers stood over them with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. "How did you move so fast?" Crix asked as he dropped his gun. The human soldier smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "We've had 3,000 years to practice." Back, on Veltar's command ship, the Kethvarian commander was brought before Captain O. Veltar expected to be tortured or executed, but O just looked at him with disappointment. "Do you know what you've done?" O asked. "I captured some humans," Veltar replied, trying to sound brave. "So what?" O shook his head. "You've reminded the galaxy that we exist. For 3,000 years, we've lived quietly in our little corner of space. We've let other species think we were weak and harmless. We've been good neighbors." He walked to the viewing screen, which showed the wreckage of the Kethvarian fleet floating in space. "But now everyone will remember why the old law existed," O continued. "They'll remember that humans didn't disappear from galactic politics because we were defeated. We disappeared because we chose to." "What's going to happen to me?" Veltar asked. "You're going to live," O replied. "You're going to go back to your people and tell them what you saw here today. You're going to make sure they understand what happens when someone breaks the law." O turned back to face Veltar. "And then you're going to pray that we decide to go back to sleep." Throughout the galaxy, alien governments were receiving reports of the battle in the Kethvar system. Ships that had been thought to be exploration vessels suddenly revealed themselves as warships. Space stations that were supposed to be research posts activated defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets. On the planet Zephyria, Ambassador Nethal of the Galactic Council was reading the reports with growing fear. She was an old alien, with blue skin and 4 arms, and she had been alive when the last humans walked away from galactic politics. "Get me a direct communication link to Earth," she told her aide. "Highest priority." "Yes, Ambassador, what should I tell them?" Nethal looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was waking up from its long sleep, and she wasn't sure if the galaxy was ready for what came next. "Tell them," she said quietly, "that we remember the law, and we want to keep it." The news of what happened in the Kethvar system spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every government, every military force, and every trading company knew the same terrifying truth. The humans were back. On Earth, in a building that most people thought was just another government office, Emperor Shan Wujin sat at a desk reading reports from across human space. Shan was not a young man, but his eyes were sharp and his mind was clear. He had been preparing for this day his entire life. "Sir," his aide, Colonel Kim Yunji, entered the room with more files. "We're getting communication requests from 47 different governments. They all want to talk." Shan nodded slowly. "I'm sure they do. What about the Kethvarians?" "Their government collapsed this morning, sir. Prime Minister Kolveth was removed from power by his own military. The new leadership is asking for peace talks." "And the Galactic Council?" "Ambassador Nethal has requested an emergency meeting. She says it's about restoring proper diplomatic relations." Shan laughed quietly. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had pretended that humans didn't exist. Now they wanted to talk about diplomatic relations. "Tell the ambassador that we'll meet with her," Shan said, "but not on one of their worlds. Here, on Earth." Meanwhile, Captain Li Ji-wan had finally reached the Kethvar system. But instead of finding a battle, he found Captain O's fleet helping to repair the new Sol. Ji-wan's small trading ship looked tiny next to the massive human warships. As he docked with the colony ship, he felt like he was seeing his own species for the first time. "Captain Ji-wan," Kim Sun-ho met him at the airlock. "Thank you for coming to help us." Ji-wan looked around at the bustling activity on the ship. Human engineers were working alongside the colonists to fix the damage from the battle. Everyone seemed calm and efficient, like attacking alien fleets was just another day at work. "How are your people?" Ji-wan asked. "We're good," Sun-ho replied. "We lost some people, but we saved the colonists. All 50,000 of them are safe." Dr. Park, who had come with Ji-wan, was staring at the human soldiers who walked past them. These weren't the peaceful traders and scientists he was used to seeing. These were warriors, and they moved like they had been born for war. "I don't understand," Park said to Sunho. "Where did all these ships come from? Where did all these soldiers come from?" Sunho smiled. "They were always there, Doctor. We just didn't talk about them." "But why?" "Because," Sunho replied, "we hoped we would never need them. On the other side of the galaxy, the remains of the Kethvarian government were trying to figure out how to survive. High Chancellor Morden, the only leader who had understood the danger, was now in charge of what was left of their military." "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his aide. "Across all our systems, maybe 300 that can still fight," the aide replied. "But sir, the reports from our scouts are terrifying. The humans have thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands." Morden nodded sadly. "I tried to warn Veltar, I tried to warn them all. What do we do now, Chancellor?" Morden walked to his window and looked out at the stars. "We do what my grandfather's grandfather should have done. We remember why the law exists." The next day, Morden sent a message to Earth. It was short and simple. "We surrender. We ask for mercy. We will never break the law again." The message reached Emperor Shan as he was preparing for his meeting with Ambassador Nethal. The alien representative had arrived on Earth that morning, along with delegates from dozens of other species. Shan read the Kethvarian message aloud to his council. "They surrender unconditionally. They're asking for mercy." General Han Mirai, who was sitting at the table, shook her head. "They attacked our people. They tried to enslave 50,000 humans. Why should we show them mercy?" "Because," Shan replied, "that's what separates us from them." The meeting with the Galactic Council took place in the same room where human leaders had signed the original treaty 3,000 years ago. Ambassador Nethal sat across from Emperor Shan, her forearms folded in a gesture of respect. "Your Majesty," she began, "the Council wishes to express its regret for what happened to your people." "Regret?" Shan asked. "The Kethvarians tried to enslave human colonists, and you express regret?" Nethal looked uncomfortable. "The Council had no knowledge of the Kethvarian attack. If we had known, you would have stopped them?" Shan interrupted. "Or would you have pretended it wasn't happening, like you've pretended we don't exist for 3,000 years? The alien ambassador was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We remember the old treaty, Your Majesty. We remember the law. We want to honor it." Shan leaned back in his chair. "The law was simple. Don't hunt the humans. Don't attack human ships. Don't enslave human populations. The Kethvarians broke all 3 parts of that law." "Yes," Nethal agreed. "And now they are being punished for it, are they?" Shan asked. 12 star systems that belong to the Kethvarian Empire are now under human control. Their government has collapsed, their military has surrendered, but their people are still alive. Their worlds are still intact. Nethal realized what Shan was saying. "You could have destroyed them completely." "We could have," Shan confirmed. 3,000 years ago, we probably would have. But we've learned something in all that time. Mercy is more powerful than vengeance." The Emperor stood up and walked to a large window that looked out over the city. "The law wasn't created to protect humans from other species. It was created to protect other species from humans." "We understand that now," Nethal said quietly. "Do you?" Shan turned back to face her. "Because I'm not sure you do. You see, the galaxy has forgotten what humans are really like when we're angry. You've only seen us when we're peaceful." He pressed a button on his desk, and the wall behind him showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared on the map, showing the locations of human ships and bases. "This is what we built while you thought we were sleeping," Shan said. "This is what we've been preparing for 3,000 years." Nethal stared at the map in shock. There were red dots everywhere, in every sector of the galaxy. The humans hadn't withdrawn from galactic affairs at all. They had been watching, waiting, and building. "My God," she whispered, "you could take over the entire galaxy." "Yes," Shan replied simply. We could, but we won't. Do you know why? Nethal shook her head. Because we don't want to, Shan explained. We tried being conquerors once. We didn't like what it made us become, so we chose a different path. The Emperor sat back down and looked directly at the alien ambassador. But that was our choice. If other species force us to become conquerors again, we will. And next time, we might not choose to stop. The meeting ended with a new treaty. The old law was restored and strengthened. Any species that attacked humans would face not just human retaliation, but punishment from the entire Galactic Council. The Kethvarian Empire was broken up. Their 12 star systems were given independence under human protection. Feltar and his officers were put on trial, not for war crimes, but for the greater sin of forgetting history. High Chancellor Morden was allowed to live quietly on a small planet, where he spent his remaining years writing down the old stories, so they would never be forgotten again. Captain Li Jiwan returned to his trading routes, but now every port in the galaxy knew exactly what his small ship represented. Pirates gave him a wide berth. Corrupt officials suddenly became honest when he docked. The flag he flew carried new meaning. Dr. Park published his findings about human history, making sure that the truth could never again be lost or corrupted. Schools across the galaxy began teaching the real story of humanity's past. The new soul continued to its original destination, the planet Haven's Rest. The colonists built their new home knowing that they were protected not just by distance, but by the knowledge that their family would always come for them. Kim Sunho and Choi Yuna were married in a small ceremony on their new world. They had children who grew up safe and free, never knowing how close they had come to slavery. Captain O and his fleet returned to their hidden bases, ready to sleep again until the next time they were needed. But now the galaxy knew they were there, watching and waiting. And on Earth, Emperor Shan Wujin went back to his quiet office, reading reports and making decisions that affected the lives of trillions of beings across the galaxy. Most of those beings would never know his name, but they all lived under the protection of the law he enforced. The oldest law in the galaxy: do not hunt the humans. It existed not because humans were weak and needed protection, but because they were strong and chose restraint. The Kethvarians had learned this lesson the hard way. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3,000 years, and they had discovered that some giants are best left undisturbed. But the galaxy had also learned something else. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose not to use your power. And sometimes the greatest victory is the one you win by showing mercy instead of strength. The humans had returned to galactic affairs, but they had returned as protectors, not conquerors. They had proven that they could destroy their enemies, but they had chosen instead to teach them, and in the end, that choice made them more feared and respected than any weapon ever could.